Mom, are those real stars or ship lights? Lily Chen pressed her small palms against the viewport, her breath fogging the reinforced glass as the diplomatic vessel Harmony slipped through the darkness between worlds. Admiral Helena Chen smiled at her daughter's wonder. Both, sweetheart. The Hegemony capital system has 7 planets and thousands of orbital platforms. What you're seeing is a blend of natural and artificial light. Lily's sketchbook lay open beside her, filled with colorful drawings of aliens she hoped to meet. At 10 years old, she possessed the unique talent of capturing essences rather than exact details. Her renditions of the Krell depicted not just their iridescent scales, but somehow conveyed their renowned wisdom through subtle expressions. Was it really okay to bring me? Lily asked for perhaps the 20th time since departure. Ambassador Lin seemed worried. Helena knelt beside her daughter, straightening the collar of Lily's formal diplomatic uniform, a miniature version of her own. Having you here shows the hegemony something important about humans. We don't compartmentalize our lives like they do. Family is part of who we are, not separate from our duties. What Helena didn't say was how the diplomatic corps had debated this decision extensively. Some argued it showed vulnerability. Others insisted it demonstrated humanity's core values. In the end, Helena had made the final call, believing that the hegemony needed to understand humanity completely if true relations were to be established. The Harmony docked with the perfect precision expected from humanity's flagship. Disembarking into the grand reception hall, Lily gasped at the crystalline architecture that seemed to defy gravity. Hegemony officials, tall, luminescent beings with 4 arms and elaborate cranial ridges, regarded the human delegation with what their cultural briefings suggested was curiosity. Remember, sweetheart, Helena whispered, observe everything, but follow protocol. This is history in the making. The High Executor of the Hegemony approached, towering nearly 12 feet tall, with ceremonial bioluminescent patterns rippling across his skin. Admiral Chen of Earth, we welcome you to the eternal heart of galactic civilization, he intoned, his translator rendering his harmonic speech into English. High Executor, humanity is honored by your reception, Helena replied, performing the careful half-bow their xenoculture specialists had practiced for months. The formal reception proceeded according to plan until the tour of the sacred artifacts chamber. Lily, momentarily separated from her mother by a shifting crowd of dignitaries, found herself before an unattended pedestal holding what appeared to be a softly glowing orb of swirling colors. The object reminded her of the marble her grandfather had given her, a treasured keepsake from Earth. Without thinking, Lily reached out, her fingertips barely brushing the surface of the ancient relic. The chamber fell silent instantly. The High Executor turned, his bioluminescence shifting to a deep crimson that human specialists would later identify as indication of extreme cultural offense. The ancestral memory stone has been contaminated, he announced, his translator failing to capture the harmonics of disgust in his natural voice. Helena pushed through the crowd toward her daughter, but hegemony guards had already surrounded Lily. There's been a misunderstanding, Helena called out. In our briefings, this artifact wasn't mentioned as restricted. The High Executor's secondary arms extended in what human diplomats would later recognize as a ritual gesture of judgment. The child has committed sacrilege against the collected consciousness of 17 generations. Such contamination requires purification. What happened next occurred too quickly for the human delegation to prevent. A guard activated a device that emitted a pulse of energy, striking Lily directly. She collapsed silently to the polished floor. Helena broke through the line of guards, gathering her daughter's suddenly still form in her arms. Medical emergency. Get our doctors here now. The High Executor observed with detached curiosity. The offspring's neural patterns have been reset. An unfortunate necessity when non-hegemony DNA contacts the ancestral memories. As Helena desperately searched for signs of life in her daughter's face, a hegemony official approached with a small crystalline container. As is customary, we offer compensation for your genetic investment. This nutrient crystal would allow you to produce at least 3 replacement offspring of superior quality. Helena looked up, tears streaming down her face, unable to comprehend the casual dismissal of her daughter's life. The diplomatic incident has been resolved according to hegemony law, the High Executor announced to the stunned human delegation. We shall continue relations tomorrow after a suitable recalibration period. The footage spread across Earth like wildfire, bypassing all attempts at containment by diplomatic officials. Junior Attaché Maya Wong had captured everything through her standard-issue documentation implant, from Lily's innocent touch of the artifact to her mother cradling her lifeless body, while hegemony officials offered their grotesque compensation. Within 6 hours, the raw, unedited recording had been viewed by over 4 billion humans. Helena Chen stood at the viewport of the returning vessel, her daughter's body preserved in a stasis chamber behind her. The stars seemed dimmer now, the universe colder. She hadn't spoken since leaving hegemony space, not even to acknowledge condolences from her crew. Admiral, her aide approached cautiously. There's something you should see. On the display, Helena watched silently as images from Earth appeared. Moscow's red square filled with countless candles forming Lily's name in Cyrillic letters. The normally bustling streets of Tokyo stood empty as citizens observed a spontaneous moment of silence. Outside the United Nations in New York, a mountain of children's drawings grew by the minute, each depicting Lily as imagined by children who had never met her. It's happening everywhere, the aide said softly. Global productivity has dropped 70%. They're just stopping everything. Helena's expression remained unchanged. And the hegemony's response. They've issued a statement expressing confusion at our disproportionate reaction to what they term a minor diplomatic correction. For the first time since leaving the hegemony capital, Helena's features shifted, something cold and calculating replacing the hollow shock in her eyes. As the ship docked at Earth's orbital station, Helena was surprised to find the Secretary General himself waiting. I didn't expect a personal reception, she said, her voice raw from disuse. This isn't a reception, Helena. It's a war council. Inside the station's secure conference room, Helena found representatives from every major nation and coalition on Earth, many of them bitter rivals whose diplomats normally refused to share the same room. We've never seen unity like this, the Secretary General explained. Not in human history. The Chinese president is sharing military intelligence with the Americans. The European Union and the Russian Federation have already merged their space defense systems. India and Pakistan have declared their border disputes suspended indefinitely. Helena surveyed the room. Because of Lily. Because of what she represents, the Russian president said, rising from his seat. My own granddaughter is 10 years old. When I saw that recording, he cleared his throat. There isn't a parent or grandparent on Earth who didn't feel that moment as if it were their own child. The Chinese premier nodded. The hegemony's satellites are monitoring our planet closely. Their analysts report that our behavior is merely primitive tribal mourning that will dissipate within their standard cycle, approximately 2 Earth months. They fundamentally misunderstand us, the American president added. Their species produces hundreds of offspring with minimal parental investment. They cannot comprehend what a single child means to us. Helena moved to the center of the room, her military bearing returning with each step. They believe we will forget her, she said, her voice carrying an unnatural calm that silenced the room. They don't understand that humans never truly recover from losing a child. We simply learn to build our lives around the absence. She activated the holographic display, bringing up the hegemony's detailed cultural and military files, information that had been shared during the supposedly friendly diplomatic exchange. They've made 2 critical mistakes, Helena continued. First, they assumed our differences made us incomprehensible to each other, so they shared information freely, believing we couldn't utilize it. Second, they revealed their greatest weakness. Which is? Asked the Secretary General. Helena magnified a section of the hegemony biological data. They cannot fathom genuine sacrifice for those outside one's genetic line. Their evolutionary path made them inherently self-interested. They literally cannot understand why humans across the planet mourn a child they never met. She looked around the room, meeting the eyes of each world leader. They believe we're having an emotional reaction that will fade. They don't realize we're having a transformative one that will define us. For the first time since losing Lily, Helena allowed herself a small, cold smile. Let's educate them. We appreciate your concern for our well-being during this difficult cultural adjustment, Helena Chen said, her face a perfect mask of diplomatic composure as she addressed the hegemony ambassador on the secure channel. Earth looks forward to continuing our productive relationship. The ambassador's translucent skin rippled with what humans had learned to recognize as satisfaction. A high executor is pleased by your species' rapid recovery from emotional disturbance. Your pragmatism was unexpected. Humans are full of surprises, Helena replied with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. As soon as the transmission ended, she turned to her team in the newly established Unified Earth Command. Their surveillance confirms they believe we've accepted their apology and moved on. Status reports. General Okafor of the African Coalition brought up the first holographic display. Manufacturing has been completely reproposed across all continents. Former competitors now share patents and production facilities. The Chinese-American aerospace merger has increased output by 300% in just 3 weeks. Medical developments. Helena asked. Dr. Lakshmi adjusted her glasses. The pharmaceutical breakthrough is unprecedented. Companies that once guarded their research with armies of lawyers now work in open collaboration. We've developed neural protective technology that can shield human minds from the type of energy weapon used on. She paused. On your daughter. Helena nodded briskly, refusing to dwell. And the volunteers. That's the most remarkable aspect, General Okafor continued. We expected anger, bloodlust, demands for revenge. Instead, he gestured to a junior officer who brought up global statistics. Military enlistment has increased by 857% worldwide, the young woman explained. But psychological evaluations show something extraordinary. These aren't angry mobs. They're rational, determined individuals. They're not signing up to destroy the hegemony. They're volunteering to protect humanity's future. Outside the command center's windows, Helena could see the transformation of the lunar surface. What had been a scattered collection of research outposts 3 months ago was now a sprawling complex of manufacturing facilities and launch platforms. Earth's night side glittered with unprecedented activity as industries operated around the clock. The hegemony continues to misinterpret all of this, Intelligence Director Watanabe noted, bringing up intercepted hegemony communications. Their cultural analysts believe we're engaging in displacement activities to manage our grief. They cannot conceive that a species might fundamentally reorganize itself in response to a single death. Helena studied the hegemony reports with interest. Their fundamental error is projection. Because they value only genetic continuity, they assume we must as well. They can't understand that we value the potential in each individual life. She brought up an image captured by satellites across Earth. Playgrounds where children now engaged in games with rules that would seem peculiar to outside observers. Instead of traditional games of tag or capture the flag, young humans now played complex simulations where they rescued each other from alien captors that suspiciously resembled hegemony officials. They're preparing too, Helena noted, not just the adults. Professor Vargas, the xenoanthropologist, nodded. It's extraordinary. Without explicit coordination, human children worldwide are developing play patterns that train cooperation, strategy, and resistance. They're literally playing at how to defeat the hegemony. And the hegemony sees none of this, Helena confirmed. They see it but misclassify it, Vargas corrected. Their reports label it as meaningless ritual behavior. They fundamentally cannot comprehend that a species would undergo genuine transformation for something they consider trivial. Helena moved to the central planning table, where a holographic model of the hegemony homeworld slowly rotated. How long until we're ready? At current acceleration rates, 6 more weeks, Admiral Santos reported. We've already achieved technological parity in most areas. With the unified research approach, we'll surpass them in key domains within a month. Helena's hand passed through the hologram of the hegemony capital, disrupting it momentarily. Begin final preparations for Operation Lily's Garden. As her team dispersed to their stations, Helena remained alone with the holographic display. She tapped a control, and the image shifted to the hegemony's cultural archives. Thousands of years of history and development. She had spent countless hours studying them, not looking for military weaknesses, but for something more fundamental. You don't understand us, she whispered to the image of the High Executor's palace. Understand you. And there are worse things than death for a species that values only its continuity. She closed the display and walked toward the memorial garden that had been planted outside the command center. A small patch of earth lilies under a transparent dome, facing the stars. This is your war council. The Russian general's eyebrows rose as he surveyed the room. Alongside the expected military strategists and government officials sat a collection of individuals who seemed entirely out of place. Video game designers, children's book authors, theme park architects, and behavioral psychologists. Helena nodded confidently. The hegemony has existed for 12,000 years. Their military doctrine is refined to perfection. If we fight them conventionally, we lose. But these people... The general gestured to a young woman with purple hair who was explaining something enthusiastically using virtual reality projections. That's Zhou Chen, no relation, Helena explained. She designs massively multiplayer games. Her team has identified fundamental blind spots in hegemony strategic thinking by modeling their evolution and social structures. Helena guided him to the center of the room where a holographic simulation displayed a complex series of nested spheres representing hegemony defense systems. The breakthrough came from an unexpected direction, she continued. Our military analysts were stuck in traditional paradigms, but Zhou's team approached it as a game design challenge. They identified that the hegemony's hive mind evolutionary path created 3 critical weaknesses. She activated the first simulation node. 1. They cannot comprehend genuine self-sacrifice for non-genetic relatives. 2. Their group consensus model makes them unable to process contradictory information simultaneously. 3. They have no concept of deliberate misdirection that isn't for immediate personal gain. Dr. Lakshmi joined them, pointing to biological models of hegemony neural patterns. Their brains literally cannot process the idea that someone would accept personal destruction for an abstract principle or for individuals outside their genetic line. When faced with such behavior, they experience the equivalent of a cognitive error, a momentary processing gap. And you plan to exploit this cognitive error? The general asked. Helena's eyes gleamed. We plan to weaponize it. Across the room, a middle-aged man with disheveled hair was arguing intensely with the American admiral. Traditional electromagnetic shielding is useless. We need to think in terms of cognitive disruption, not physical barriers. That's Dr. Emerson, Helena explained, former game theorist who now designs puzzles for children with neurological differences. He's helping us develop countermeasures to hegemony weapons by approaching them as cognitive challenges rather than technological ones. The Russian general shook his head in amazement. And these approaches are working. In response, Helena led him to a testing chamber. Inside, a replica of the energy weapon that had been used on Lily was aimed at a human-sized target. When activated, the energy pulse simply curved around the target, dissipating harmlessly. We discovered that the weapon doesn't target biological material. It targets neural patterns, Helena explained. Dr. Emerson developed a countermeasure based on children's perception exercises. The solution wasn't a shield, but a cognitive redirection. This is why you're having children help design our defenses, the general realized. Helena nodded. The hegemony evolved from hive minds. They think linearly and collectively. Human children, with their non-linear thinking and imaginative leaps, develop solutions their algorithms can't predict. At the far end of the facility, test pilots were entering simulation chambers for what appeared to be standard ship training. But instead of traditional battle scenarios, they were practicing maneuvers based on playground games, complex patterns of cooperation and sacrifice that would appear completely irrational to hegemony tactical computers. The real advantage isn't technological, Helena said quietly. It's conceptual. They believe we're building weapons. We're actually developing an entirely new form of warfare they cannot comprehend. She stopped before a sealed door labeled Operation Lily's Garden. Phase 1. This is our masterstroke, she said, entering her authorization code. The door slid open to reveal not a weapon or a battlefield plan, but an enormous communications array. Our first strike won't destroy a single hegemony ship or installation, Helena explained. It will simply share a story, Lily's story, simultaneously with every being in their empire. The general looked confused. A story? That's our weapon. For a species that values only genetic continuity and cannot comprehend sacrifice for others, Helena replied, understanding what a single child means to humanity will break them in ways no conventional weapon ever could. She activated the central display, showing simulations of hegemony response patterns. Their society has no concept of mourning individuals with whom they share no genetic connection. When they understand that billions of humans grieve for a single child none of them had ever met, it will create a cognitive dissonance that their social structures cannot process. Helena's hand traced the holographic representation of the communications array. They took one of ours. In return, we'll give them something far more devastating than death. What? The general asked. Empathy, Helena answered, and the unbearable knowledge of what they've done. The hegemony border outpost Vigilant Horizon detected the approaching vessel with plenty of time to analyze its capabilities. The defense commander observed the readings with mild curiosity. Single Earth ship, diplomatic class, he reported to his superior. Minimal weapons, standard shields. Request permission to allow passage as per ongoing relations protocol. The regional overseer's skin rippled with a bioluminescent pattern indicating casual approval. Earth continues to behave rationally despite the unfortunate incident. The High Executor will be pleased to add this data to our understanding of human emotional recovery patterns. As the small Earth vessel passed through the outer defense grid, sensors confirmed it carried only a skeleton crew, 5 humans operating what appeared to be communication equipment. No weapons were detected beyond standard defensive capabilities. Curious, the overseer noted. They're broadcasting on all frequencies but sending no message. The communication officer adjusted his sensory ridges. There is a carrier signal, but it contains no data packets we can interpret. Allow it through. Their primitive technology often requires unnecessary bandwidth. The human ship continued its approach to the hegemony core worlds, broadcasting continuously. At each checkpoint, the same assessment was made. A harmless diplomatic vessel carrying a peculiar but non-threatening transmission. On the bridge of the Earth vessel *Remembrance*, Captain Maya Wong, the same junior attaché whose implant had recorded Lily's death, monitored the hegemony's reactions with grim satisfaction. All checkpoints cleared. Admiral, she reported via quantum link to Helena Chen on Earth. The Trojan horse is approaching the city walls. Helena's voice came through clearly. Activate Phase 1 on my mark. 3, 2, 1. Mark. Wong pressed her palm against the activation panel. Transmission initiated. May Lily's story be heard. Across hegemony space, on every world, station, and vessel, communication systems suddenly altered. Personal entertainment feeds, news broadcasts, and operational displays all simultaneously began showing the same content. It began with Lily's laughter, a sound so innocent and joyful that many hegemony citizens paused, experiencing an unfamiliar sensation as the sound triggered dormant neural pathways. Then came images from Lily's life, her drawings of the alien she had hoped to meet, recordings of her practicing the formal hegemony greeting, her excited questions about their culture. Without narration or explanation, the transmission then shifted to the unaltered footage of her death. Not dramatized or edited for effect, simply the raw truth of what had happened, followed by the hegemony official offering the replacement offspring crystal to her grieving mother. The final segment showed Earth's response, the global mourning, the memorials created by children who had never met Lily, the unified human commitment to ensure such a tragedy would never happen again. Throughout hegemony space, an unprecedented phenomenon occurred. Individuals separated by vast distances and social hierarchies experienced synchronized emotional responses. Many young hegemony members, whose neural plasticity was greater than their elders, found themselves weeping, an action their species hadn't evolved for, but discovered they were capable of. On the hegemony homeworld, the High Executor received alarming reports from across the Empire. "Block the transmission immediately," he ordered. "We cannot," his chief technologist replied, skin pale with distress. "The humans have embedded it within our base communication protocols. Blocking it would disable our entire network." "Then prepare defensive measures. This is clearly a prelude to attack." But the expected military assault never came. Instead, as the transmission completed its cycle, a simple text message appeared on every hegemony display. Her name was Lily Chen. She was one human child among billions. Every human child is equally precious to us all. This is what you fail to understand. As the High Executor prepared to address his increasingly destabilized population, sensors detected new Earth vessels entering hegemony space. But instead of approaching military targets, they moved directly to civilian structures that hegemony tactical analysis had identified as vulnerable. The hegemony commander of the defensive fleet sent an urgent message: Earth vessels approaching civilian habitats, preparing to neutralize threat. He watched in confusion as the Earth ships positioned themselves between the habitats and his own defense platforms. Tactical analysis could find no strategic advantage to such positioning. "They appear to be protecting our civilian populations," he reported uncertainly. "From us." As the hegemony leadership struggled to understand this incomprehensible tactic, Helena Chen addressed Earth's unified forces from the command center. "Phase 1 complete," she announced. "The hegemony now understands what they took from us. Phase 2 begins now. Show them who we truly are." She looked at the holographic display of hegemony civilian habitats now under Earth's protection. "They expect us to inflict the same pain they caused. Instead, we will demonstrate what they cannot comprehend: that the true measure of civilization is not how you treat your own kind, but how you treat those who have harmed you." The first reports from hegemony worlds confirmed the strategy's effectiveness. Young hegemony members were publicly questioning their leadership for the first time in their species' history, asking how they had so fundamentally misunderstood their neighbors. "They thought we valued Lily only because she was ours," Helena said softly. "Now they begin to understand that we valued her because she was." "They are deliberately sacrificing tactical advantage," the hegemony supreme strategist insisted, his skin fluctuating between confusion patterns. "Our models cannot determine their objective." The High Executor paced the central chamber of the Imperial Citadel, surrounded by emergency projections of battles occurring across hegemony space. None followed any recognizable pattern of warfare. "Explain again why their ships are positioning themselves as shields for our civilian habitats," he demanded. The military coordinator adjusted his neural interface. "Earth vessels are intercepting our own defensive fire when it risks civilian collateral damage. They appear to be protecting our non-combatants from us. That cannot be their true objective," the High Executor dismissed. "No species sacrifices its own genetic material to preserve unrelated organisms. There must be strategic deception at work." On the tactical display, a damaged Earth vessel was shown diverting from its mission to rescue occupants of a hegemony civilian transport that had been caught in crossfire. The Earth ship's commander had deliberately positioned his vessel between the transport and incoming debris, suffering significant hull damage. "We intercepted their communication," the intelligence director reported, activating the audio. "This is Captain Okafor of Earth Vessel *Mercy*. We've got hegemony civilian transport in distress. Diverting to assist. Captain, that puts you in the line of fire from their defense platform." "Understood. Those are children on that transport." Proceeding with rescue. The High Executor's skin hemmed with incomprehension. "The humans risk themselves for hegemony offspring. Offspring they have no genetic connection to. After we..." He didn't complete the thought. The implication hung heavily in the chamber. At the Hegemony War Academy, junior tacticians struggled to model human battle strategies. Their simulations repeatedly failed because the base algorithms could not process the observed behavior. "They're deliberately allowing our ships to escape when they detect medical personnel aboard," one analyst reported. "And they're prioritizing targets based on threat to civilians rather than strategic value." Most concerning, the Academy director noted, captured human soldiers consistently explain their motivation as for Lily, despite having no genetic relationship to the terminated offspring. When interrogated, a wounded Earth pilot had looked at her hegemony captors with genuine pity. "You still don't understand, do you? I never met Lily Chen. But she could have been my daughter, my sister, my neighbor. Every child is connected to all of us." The hegemony interrogator had been unable to process this concept, labeling it delusional thinking induced by combat stress. But as similar reports flooded in from across the empire, younger hegemony members began questioning their leadership's understanding of humans. On colonial worlds where contact with other species was more common, public gatherings formed, unprecedented in hegemony society, where hierarchy determined all interaction patterns. The most dramatic development came when Earth unveiled its next strategic move. Instead of pressing their military advantage, Admiral Chen appeared on all channels throughout hegemony space with an unexpected declaration. "To all citizens of the hegemony, Earth does not seek your destruction or subjugation. We offer immediate amnesty and alliance to any hegemony world that acknowledges the fundamental principle that all sentient life has inherent value, including the lives of children from all species." She paused, allowing her next words to resonate across thousands of worlds. "To demonstrate our commitment to this principle, Earth forces have been instructed to prioritize the protection of hegemony civilians above all military objectives. We invite you to witness the difference between leadership that values continuation of power and leadership that values life itself." The transmission concluded with images of Earth children, placing flowers at memorials for hegemony civilian casualties. Casualties caused primarily by their own forces' disregard for collateral damage. In the Imperial Citadel, the High Executor watched with growing alarm as reports came in of peripheral hegemony worlds raising unauthorized symbols. Lily's colorful drawing of different species standing together beneath twin suns. "The humans are fracturing our unity," he realized. "Not with weapons, but with understanding." "Worse than that," the intelligence director said quietly. "They're making our youngest question whether we are worthy of their loyalty." On Colony World Den of Nine, young hegemony scientist Virax addressed a gathering of his peers, his skin displaying the forbidden patterns of independent thought. "The humans could have destroyed us," he said. "Their technology now surpasses ours. Instead, they shield our children with their bodies while our leaders dismiss all life as replaceable genetic material." He raised his four arms in a gesture that hadn't been seen in hegemony society for millennia, the ancient symbol for evolutionary choice. "Perhaps we have been following the wrong path of development," he suggested. "Perhaps what humans call empathy is not a weakness to be evolved beyond, but a strength we have forgotten." As his words spread across hegemony space, Helena Chen monitored the growing fractures in their society with grim satisfaction. "They're beginning to understand," she told her council. "Prepare for Phase 3. Deploy the Ancestral Guardian," the High Executor commanded, his skin pulsing with patterns that hadn't been seen in the Citadel for 1,000 years, the bioluminescent signature of existential fear. The Supreme Council members shifted uncomfortably. High Executor, the weapon has never been tested on a species with human neural patterns. The risk off. The risk of doing nothing is the collapse of 12,000 years of hegemony unity, he interrupted. The humans have turned our own values against us. Nearly 30 peripheral worlds now display the child symbol. We must demonstrate that our evolutionary path is superior. Deep beneath the Imperial Citadel, ancient mechanisms stirred to life. The ancestral guardian, the hegemony's ultimate defensive measure, had been created during their early evolutionary wars, before they had eliminated all competing sentient species on their homeworld. Unlike conventional weapons, the Guardian operated on consciousness itself. It was designed to identify and target the genetic frequency of a specific species' neural patterns across multiple star systems simultaneously. On Earth, alarms sounded throughout the unified command center. Massive energy buildup detected in the hegemony core, reported the sensor chief. Patterns matched the theoretical signature described in their restricted archives. Helena Chen nodded calmly. They've activated their doomsday option, exactly as predicted. Initiate Operation Lily's Garden. Phase 3. Throughout human space, specially designed transmitters activated, broadcasting a signal developed by the unlikely team of quantum physicists, child psychologists, and video game designers. As the ancestral guardian reached full power, its consciousness targeting matrix swept outward from the hegemony homeworld, only to encounter the human countermeasure. Inside the Imperial Citadel's control chamber, technicians reported in confusion. The Guardian has altered its targeting parameters. It's not attacking human neural patterns. What is it targeting? Demanded the High Executor. Before anyone could answer, every display in the Citadel changed to show the same images. Not of humans or current events, but of the hegemony's own sealed historical archives. What is this? The High Executor demanded. The intelligence director stared in horror at the displays. Our complete, unredacted history. The human countermeasure hasn't just deflected the Guardian, it's reprogrammed it to access our most secure historical database. Across all hegemony worlds, citizens witnessed what their leadership had hidden for millennia. The systematic extermination of 27 sentient species during the hegemony's expansion. Not collateral damage from warfare, but deliberate elimination of evolutionary competitors deemed genetically inferior. Most devastating were the records showing that 7 species thought long extinct had actually been preserved in small numbers for experimental purposes, living specimens kept in stasis for generations. Young hegemony citizens across the empire watched in horror as their civilization's founding myth of peaceful ascendance crumbled before their eyes. On the colony world that had already begun displaying Lily's symbol, scientist Virax addressed an even larger gathering. Our leaders claimed humans were primitive for valuing individual lives. Now we see they did so because acknowledging such value would condemn their own history. Military units across the empire began reporting confused chain of command as officers refused contradictory orders. Some defensive platforms went offline as their operators abandoned posts. Peripheral worlds openly declared alignment with Earth's principles. In the Imperial Citadel, the High Executor watched his 12,000-year empire fracture in real time. How? He demanded of his intelligence officers. How did they defeat our ultimate weapon and turn it against us? They understood us better than we understood them, came the simple reply. They predicted exactly how we would respond and prepared accordingly. As the Guardian's program continued displaying the unfiltered history, Helena Chen's flagship appeared in orbit around the hegemony homeworld, impossibly bypassing all defensive measures. The human admiral requests a direct meeting with the High Executor, reported a junior communication officer, the only one still at his post. They've destroyed us without firing a shot. The High Executor realized. Our own history was the weapon they used against us. When Helena Chen's shuttle landed at the Imperial Citadel, She came alone and unarmed. The once imposing corridors were eerily quiet, most officials having fled as their civilization's foundations collapsed around them. In the Grand Imperial Chamber, the High Executor waited, his skin now a dull gray, the color of hegemony defeat. "You could have destroyed us conventionally," he stated as Helena entered. "Your technology surpassed ours weeks ago. Why this elaborate approach?" Helena placed a small hologram projector on the floor between them. It activated to display not tactical data or surrender terms, but Lily's final artwork, an imagined scene of human and hegemony children playing together. "Because she would have wanted even you to have the chance to understand," Helena answered simply. The High Executor stared at the image, experiencing for the first time in his long life the emotion humans called regret. 1 year after Lily Chen's death, the former imperial citadel of the hegemony hosted an unprecedented gathering. The Grand Chamber, once reserved exclusively for the hegemony leadership caste, now welcomed representatives from 27 species, including 7 whose existence had been hidden from the galaxy for millennia. The massive hall had been transformed. Where once stark utilitarian design had emphasized hierarchy and power, now living gardens created spaces of natural beauty. At the center stood a transparent dome containing plants from every represented world, thriving together in a carefully designed ecosystem. Helena Chen, now bearing the title of Chancellor of the Galactic Cooperative, stood at the podium wearing not a military uniform, but simple diplomatic attire. Beside her stood the former High Executor, his once imposing frame somehow diminished, his skin displaying the muted patterns of profound transformation. 1 year ago, Helena began. A single act born of misunderstanding and inflexible thinking set in motion events that none of us could have predicted. My daughter Lily came to the stars bearing curiosity and hope. Her death could have sparked a cycle of vengeance that might have destroyed multiple civilizations. She gestured to the assembled delegates. Instead, we stand here today to ratify the Lily Accords, a new framework for galactic cooperation based on the recognition that diversity of thought, biology, and culture represents our greatest collective strength. The first to sign was Virax, now leading the Hegemony Reformation Council. As he approached the document, his skin displayed entirely new bioluminescent patterns that xenobiologists had identified as representing concepts the hegemony had no previous terms for: empathy, remorse, and hope. "The revelation of our true history nearly destroyed us," he acknowledged to the assembly. "Many still struggle to reconcile what we believed ourselves to be with what our leaders made us. But in that painful truth came opportunity. The chance to evolve not just physically but morally." Most remarkable was the presence of the Philasians, one of the species long thought extinct after hegemony pacification. Small in stature with iridescent scales and compound eyes, they had survived in hidden stasis chambers for generations. Their representative, Orishath, moved forward on 6 delicate limbs to add her species mark to the Accords. "We who were deemed unworthy of existence now help shape a future where no intelligence is considered disposable," she said, her translator conveying the complex harmonics of her native speech. The human child's death opened the archives that revealed our survival. In this way, her life continues through our liberation. The signing ceremony lasted hours as each species added their endorsement to the new compact. Its core principles established rights for all sentient beings, with special protections for the young of all species, ensuring that what happened to Lily would never be repeated. Most profoundly, the Accords created the Galactic Memorial Archive, a repository of historical truths that could never again be hidden or altered for political purposes. In the weeks that followed, Hegemony Society experienced what many described as an awakening. Having evolved beyond most emotions they considered primitive, they now found themselves rediscovering empathy through dedicated neural retraining programs. Hegemony children, whose education had previously focused exclusively on genetic continuity, now engaged in cross-species play groups, forming genuine bonds with the children of former enemies. The most touching development came 6 months after the accord signing, when the first Hegemony Human Cultural Exchange Program brought Hegemony children to Earth. At what had been the site of the largest memorial to Lily in Beijing, the visiting children helped plant a garden based on her artwork. Helena Chen watched from a distance as a young Hegemony girl carefully placed a flowering plant into prepared soil alongside a human boy of similar age. "They're adapting their hands to be gentler with the seedlings," noted Dr. Lakshmi, who had joined Helena for the ceremony. "That's significant neurological plasticity, consciously modifying the evolved traits to accommodate another species' needs." "The physician said I would never find closure," Helena replied quietly. They were right. There is no closure for losing a child. She watched as the children completed their planting, the Hegemony girl's skin glowing with new patterns that translated roughly to shared joy. "But there can be continuation," Helena added. Lily imagined a galaxy where different species could learn from each other. She drew it in her sketchbooks before she ever left Earth. Across the garden, the children had finished their work and spontaneously began playing a game that combined elements of both human and Hegemony traditional activities, creating something entirely new in the process. The former High Executor, now known simply as Elder Vash, approached Helena with the careful movements of one still learning to navigate human social norms. "I will never understand how you transformed our greatest weapon into an opportunity for our redemption," he said. "By all logical analysis, you should have destroyed us for what we did." Helena watched the playing children for a long moment before answering. "Logic didn't guide us," she finally replied. "A child did." Lily believed the universe could be better than it was. In honoring her memory, we had to create the world she imagined, not merely avenge the one she lost. As twilight fell over the garden, lights illuminated a small plaque beside the newly planted flowers. It bore a simple inscription in multiple languages. "For Lily Chen, who taught us that understanding must precede judgment, and that even the youngest among us can help shake the stars."